Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers in search of creative teaching strategies delivered in the amount of time it takes to blow up 100 balloons for your child's birthday party, unless that's just me, or finally clean out your car. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm glad to welcome you to episode 17, all about escape rooms. I'm happy to be welcoming my first ever guest to the podcast today, Emily Aierstock of Read It, Write It, Learn It, to share her experiences creating and completing several escape rooms with her students in New York. Before we turn to the interview, I'd like to answer a question that just might be on your mind. What the heck is an escape room? Escape rooms have been around for a long time. You can find them in museums all over the world, challenging participants to solve a series of riddles, clues, in order to solve a mystery and break out of the escape room. Some escape rooms are very complex, involving UV lights, multiple locks, special codes, tools hidden all over the room. Others are simpler and cheaper. You can make an escape room as complex as you want and as expensive as you can afford. But you can also keep it simpler and make it free, which is probably what you want to do if you're teaching in an English classroom. And speaking of free, to celebrate my first interview show, I'm giving away a few fun items to help you get started with escape rooms. One winner will receive the gear to get started with DIYing escape rooms with just a bit of added complexity. A lock box, a padlock that takes several letter combinations, and a set of blank puzzles waiting to be filled in. You don't need this kind of gear to do an escape room, but it is fun. Another winner will receive a bundle of 3 fabulous pre-made escape rooms from Emily Aierstock, today's guest. If you'd like a chance to win, all you need to do is leave an honest review for this podcast on iTunes in the next 2 weeks, and then email me at betsy@nowsparkcreativity.com to let me know your information so I can send you your prize if you win. Your review will help spread the creative teaching ideas from this show to more teachers all over the world, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts. You can find out more about this giveaway and see pictures of the different prizes by visiting today's show notes at www.nowsparkcreativity.com. Just click on the podcast tab at the top of the page. All right, let's quickly consider an example of how the escape room concept could be applied to your English classroom. Imagine for a second that you're introducing The Great Gatsby and you want to get students prepped on 1920s America before you dive into the text. So you separate the students into groups and give them each a short piece about flappers as the first clue. They're reading, and pretty soon they realize that certain words in the piece are highlighted. The highlighted words are to, the, go, and back. What could this mean? One at a time, the teams realize they must search the back of the classroom to find the next clue. There they find iPads on a desk that are all queued up to show a short YouTube clip about prohibition. They watch the clip and they're wondering what to do next. They're looking around and suddenly they realize under each iPad there's a sticky note that says, "If you know how to get into a speakeasy, you can find the next clue. The password is Jazz Age." Students, now that they know what a speakeasy is, rush over to the door and find you there, ready to hand them their next clue. When they whisper Jazz Age, you give them a short paragraph about the Jazz Age and a set of song lyrics from a 1920s jazz song. Together with their group, they read the paragraph and comb through the lyrics, trying to figure out what the secret is at the same time they're learning about jazz. Finally, they realize 3 letters are bolded, K, Y, and E. At the bottom of the lyrics, the clue is, find it where words begin and you're almost there. Suddenly, the students realize they can rearrange the letters to spell K-E-Y key and look around for where words begin. After examining the computer keypad and several notebooks, they find a small key in the chalkboard dust tray. They race madly across the room in search of a lockbox, and finally, they find it under your desk. They open it to discover confetti and Smarties candy. You snap their picture and have them return the key for the next group, then give them their new copies of The Great Gatsby. Now I know, it sounds intense. It sounds like a lot of work to think of and get set up. But the more you begin trying to imagine how to mix clues into learning, the easier it starts to seem. I especially want to point you today toward the show notes, where I'm doing a giant post including videos and tons of links with information about how to create escape rooms and how to find escape rooms others have already created for you. Let's turn now to the interview and hear what experienced escape room pro Emily Aierstock has to say. Okay, we're delighted to welcome today Emily Aierstock from Read It, Write It, Learn It, a wonderful website offering ELA strategies for junior high and high school English teachers. So I invited her here today because she is a pro at ELA escape rooms, and we're going to be talking to her all about her experiences with them. Hello, Emily.
Hi.
I'm
How
so
are
glad
you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great as well.
I'm so glad to welcome you because I've so enjoyed your blog posts and the resources that you've shared about escape rooms.
Thanks.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I have been teaching 7th grade ELA for the past 16 years, which is a little mind-blowing to me, but I've been in the classroom for a really long time. And last year, I started blogging and just connecting with a lot of other teachers through social media. And I think it was around that time that I stumbled upon the idea of escape rooms. And I knew it was something that I needed to bring into my classroom, especially as we're approaching state testing time, which can be a time where kids get a little disconnected.
Yeah.
So I had to check out escape rooms and find out more.
Awesome.
And that was really how it all started with escape rooms.
I know you've done several different types of escape rooms with your students, and I enjoyed reading the one that you blogged about in a lot of detail, which I am going to link to in the show notes for everybody. But can you just talk to us a little bit about one of the escape rooms you've done with your students?
Absolutely. It's actually the first escape room I did, and it was the one that I blogged about. We were approaching state testing season, and I wanted to reinforce the ideas of close reading and review multiple choice strategies that I knew would help my students as they started reading and answering multiple choice questions in a testing situation. And a lot of times students, it can be a really bland kind of year if I let it be.
Yeah.
So with the idea of escape rooms, I started listing the standards that I wanted students to meet and the different skills that I wanted them to practice. And I came up with just one reading passage and 5 multiple choice questions. But the way I set it up in the escape room system was for each multiple choice question, they were practicing a different skill and had to unlock different codes. So just for example, one of my favorite clues involved a bullseye, and students had to answer a multiple choice question and not just find the right answer, but they had to rank the right answer and then the partially right answer, and then the one that was kind of obviously wrong, but the one that was really obviously wrong. So they had to really think through the different answer choices. And then when they ranked those different answer choices, they had different letters. So for example, if the answer was A was the best answer and B was partially right and C was partially wrong and D was completely wrong, then that led to a code, which led them to their next clue. And once I started to put it was pretty crazy. But the kids were so engaged. And when that first escape room took place in my classroom, the kids were on their feet, close reading in teams, and it was all a fun game for them, but there was so much skill practice going on.
Yeah.
And it was a moment in teaching where you just kind of stand up on the side of the classroom and you just watch it all unfold. And there's that buzz that happens where kids aren't quiet and they're not being loud. They're just engaged and plugged into their activity and plugged into their group work, and they were all involved. So it was such a cool thing to see. And that was the first escape room experience. And I had to create more after that first experience. So it was great. And for that first one, I actually I had seen online another teacher and another blog I read. I kind of researched all around to get the ideas. And I saw another teacher who bought toolboxes from the dollar store and locks from the dollar store and put things together herself. And I knew that the clubs at our school all had money boxes. So I just emailed our entire staff and said, I'm trying this new idea in my classroom. Does anybody have a money box that I can borrow? And we had 5 clues in our first escape room, and I just borrowed 5 money boxes. So it was actually completely free, which was pretty awesome. And none of my boxes had locks, but the students' codes had to lead them to where the box was hidden in the classroom. And just the act of opening up the box and finding the next clue it kind of just created an atmosphere in the classroom where it was fun, and it was the idea of like opening a box and finding the next clue. So that was all they needed. None of the boxes had actual locks on them, but my 7th graders were totally happy.
That's wonderful.
And it worked out really well.
So even without UV flashlights and special decoder rings and such, students can get really engaged with escape rooms.
Absolutely. The first time when I was brainstorming the escape room, which I think the planning process of creating an escape room is the most labor intensive because you really do have to think of, for me personally, I just wanted to make sure that the learning was there. So I didn't want to create any clues that were just like kind of hokey.
Right.
They had to teach the kids something. And I also, as I was planning out the different events and activities the kids were doing, it was hard to avoid some of the things I would have to buy. Like, it would be fun to have a black light pen, but I really I think I wrote it over February break, and I wanted to implement the escape room right afterwards. So I just wanted it to be something I could implement right away and, like I said, not buy anything. So at first I was looking at all that fun stuff, and it is fun, but I think it's possible to do it without any of those things, and kids are still going to enjoy it.
I think that will be a relief to a lot of teachers listening, because it's easy to get caught up in, how am I going to get $500 to start my first escape room?
Yeah, it can be really cheap. And actually the next 2 escape rooms I did a poetry escape room, and that one was return the missing poets to their poems. So each poem, there were different activities that led to clues to figure out the names of the poets. And then the students had to match the poets to the poems that they wrote, which was really neat because it taught a lot of different literary devices and poetic devices. But for that one, I used manila envelopes, which were kind of detective-y anyway, but they were in our school office. And I just put the clues in each one. Yeah, and the kids had to untwist just the little string to get to their clue. And for my 7th grade students, they had so much fun with it.
Do you do like a prize at the end when they get into the last envelope, or is there a certificate that they earn? I've seen some cute pictures online of people sort of celebrating at the end.
I do, dude. I have a candy jar in my classroom for special things. And it also has bookmarks and pencils and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah. And our first escape room ended in the prize jar. So the first group that worked through the entire escape room earned a prize from the prize jar. And then my literary devices escape room, that one, there is a little certificate at the end. Good. If the students answer correctly. So we celebrate the first team. Oftentimes, even after the first team finishes, the other teams want to work through the rest of the clues anyway. That's just great because it's fun. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's super engaging whether there's a prize or a reward or not. It's just fun to sort of celebrate at the end of such a great activity.
Yeah, I think the best thing about escape rooms is that they are so engaging, and they're the complete opposite of a traditional lesson. Kids are literally on their feet for most of the time. They are just so motivated by the idea of unlocking one clue after another. And so much learning is taking place when the escape room is designed around real learning activities. So it's pretty exciting to think of that as a teacher.
Yeah, I was amazed when I first started looking at escape rooms. I felt kind of overwhelmed by the idea of creating all these activities and how was I going to make it, engaging enough. But as I've looked at some examples of other people, I can start to see how you can sort of twist clues into the kinds of activities you want students to be doing and take a standard activity and make it into this really exciting format. And I think for a lot of teachers listening, they're wondering, okay, it sounds like if I have 50 hours to spend, this would be the most incredible pedagogy tool ever. But do you think it's possible to incorporate some escape rooms into your teaching without, sacrificing your whole vacation? Is it possible once you get going to create something relatively quickly?
I think relatively.
Okay.
It does. I mean, once I did my first escape, the first escape room was definitely the hardest.
Sure.
Once I had that under my belt, the next one, I really, I just thought about the different activities at each station. I kind of drew almost like a mind map in order, like just rectangles on a piece of white paper with just each learning goal that I had for every different clue. And then I tried to work out how I would create a clue and a fun mystery to unlock at each spot. So that's really the first big hurdle to cross. And then it's just a matter of logistics, like planning out where each clue will be hidden in the classroom, making sure. One of the biggest questions I get for the escape rooms I created, and one of the things that I had to work through personally as a teacher, was figuring out how to make sure every student was held accountable for what was happening in the escape room. And we do these escape rooms in our own classrooms. Although a colleague of mine, she's a history teacher, and she actually did one in the media center, which is our school library, which was a great idea.
Yeah.
So you could use other spaces, but in a classroom, kids are going to see other students finding the next clue. So since I don't use locks and lock boxes, kids will see where the clues are, and if they watch the other groups closely enough. So I had to make sure that every group had to work through the individual clues in order to kind of win the whole escape room. And so I just created basically a worksheet where students recorded the clue answers, and that was part of what they had to hand in at the end to win the escape room, which is just a really simple thing, but it really made a difference and made it so even if kids saw group A running over to the closet in my classroom getting a clue, they would still have to figure out and unlock each clue in order to get to that point. They couldn't just follow around the other groups.
I like that.
If that
so
makes
it's
sense.
not just a race. Yeah, it's genuinely an activity for every student that they need to complete.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I also liked what you wrote on your blog about hiding enough clues at each point so that students can be doing it in all your sections throughout the day, and you don't need to reset up the escape room.
Yeah, I have almost 100 students, so in 5 different sections of 7th grade. And we have a 3-minute passing time in between classes. So I definitely would not have I had to think ahead. After my first 3 classes in the morning, I do have a study hall and a chance to reset. But I had to make sure that I just photocopied enough of each clue and put them in each location so that I wouldn't have to reset up the entire escape room.
Yeah, 3 minutes is nothing.
Yeah. And then the one other big piece of advice I have for teachers is to set clear expectations when your students start the escape room. For example, just when groups find a clue and take it out, there are a lot of papers and there's a lot of stuff that could go flying around the classroom. So I just asked my students to discreetly take the clue, bring it back to and I had them call their desk, like their workstation, where they unlock the clue, and kind of worked as a group to do their detective work, but they had to put the box back so the next group could easily get it. And I also had clear guidelines, just take one for each group member and not extras, just those little tiny things. I made sure to start each class period just for 3 to 5 minutes going over my expectations. Another one is that escape rooms are not contact sports, which
no tackling.
In junior high, the kids do get really so excited. I just wanted to make sure that they were respectful of the other groups as each group was working on the same escape room. So with those clear expectations at the beginning, I really could stand back and just watch it all unfold. And it was really cool. One of the biggest lessons my students learned that was not in my plans was perseverance, because groups, and they had to really, it's such a great higher level thinking activity, because when one method of thinking didn't work, they had to really switch gears and think through something completely differently. And one of the really neat things in one of my classes that I noticed is I did choose my groups for students to work together. I assigned the groups that they would work in, so it was
Smart.
balanced, because I have a lot of different levels and a lot of different personalities. And I noticed that sometimes my really higher level students overthought some clues, and it was really neat to see the students who sometimes struggle with other things just kind of state the obvious. And it was like, oh, that's the right answer. And it just unlocked things. And so everybody participating helped groups to be successful. And I think every kid really was a part of each group's success. It was really neat to see them all working as a team and persevering, and just thinking deeply about the different topics we were going over. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. Just the kind of creative engagement I think all teachers are looking for if they can figure out a way to set it up.
Right.
I know that you're passionate about making sure that your escape rooms stay centered on the kind of learning you really want students to be doing and don't just become kind of a fun free-for-all flight around the classroom. How do you suggest that teachers stay focused even when they're trying to come up with these different clues?
Well, I am definitely a little bit of a stickler with it when it comes to stuff like that. We play tons of games in my classroom, not just escape rooms, but games all the time.
Love it.
But I think you can make anything into a fun game.
I agree.
But we always start, when I'm in the planning stages of all these activities, I always start by listing the standards, just backwards planning. List the standards. At the end of this, what skills will my students have? What will they have really mastered and been able to demonstrate? And then I plan the activities surrounding those different standards or skills. And I think that's been really successful because the students know that they are learning. The first escape room that we did, it took about a half hour, and my classes are 40 minutes. So at the end, the kids kind of just sat in their desk and took a deep breath because it was like it was almost like, oh, now I can relax. We just had this experience, and they were so excited. We were all so excited together. It was our first experience with escape rooms, and I think the excitement was contagious. And then when we finished, it was just kind of like, wow, that was so cool. And I handed the kids all an exit ticket, asking them to reflect on the skills that they learned and just to give a couple details specifically about the tasks that helped them to refine those skills. And the answers were just really awesome. It just revealed to me that a lot of learning took place. And I think it helped the students to kind of think back to their whole experience and say, I really learned a lot. And I described that bullseye activity with a multiple choice question. When my students I teach in New York State, so they take the New York State exam. And when they took the test, so many students drew bullseyes on their test, and they were ranking the answer choices. And it was just really cool because I think, especially with Common Core standards, students really do have to think of not just the right answer, but the best answer, the answer that is most aligned to the text. And there's text-based evidence to support the answer. And the kids got that from the breakout room.
Oh, that must have just given you good chills when you saw those bullseyes.
Did. And we ended up using that bullseye, which was one of the clues. I just hung up the actual bullseye sheet on our board because it just really spoke to the students, and our other teachers actually started using it. So it was a great tool.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really great place for us to end. Thank you so much for joining me to tell us all about your experience with escape rooms. I would love to share
Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. I would love to share with our listeners a little bit about how they can connect with you and learn more about escape rooms from you.
Okay. The best place to connect is my blog. My blog is readitwriteitlearnit.com. Mm-hmm. And then I also, with another teacher, started a Facebook group online, and that's called ELA Escape Rooms. So any teacher can just search on Facebook in the group section for ELA Escape Rooms, and we will pop right up. And we just share tips and ideas and talk about different things we're doing in our own classroom. So it's a great forum, especially for first timers to just get their questions answered.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. I'll be sure and link the Facebook group and your blog on the show notes from today's episode.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. As I said at the beginning, today's show notes are really extensive. I'm calling them the ultimate guide to escape rooms for the English classroom, and you really need to check them out if you want to learn more. Just head to www.nowsparkcreativity.com and click on the podcast tab at the top of the page. Then choose episode 17, ELA Escape Rooms. Be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes so you'll automatically get the upcoming episodes on speeding up your grading, getting students up and out of the classroom, and finding authentic audiences for student work. The Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. The Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more podcast recommendations, visit edupodcastnetwork.com.